welcome to another Sovereignty podcast. I am thrilled and honoured today to be joined by our very own Moira Brown, Deputy Leader of Sovereignty, all the way from Broughty Ferry. Moira joined Sovereignty at the last Sovereignty Congress. She was elected as Deputy Leader. We were meeting, I believe it was in Dalwhinnie at the time, and has been political for quite a while. I think you really sort of cut your activist teeth during the lockdown, where you were out campaigning for people's fundamental rights, like right of assembly, right to read books, and
Books, yeah.
borrow books, right to speak their minds. And we witnessed during the years of lockdown some of the most chilling, repressive, authoritarian measures that has been undertaken by any peacetime government in Scotland. So, Moira, we became aware of you at that time, and you gained our immediate respect because of your activism, because of your outspoken defence of the fundamental rights of ordinary Scottish people. So, and it was a thrill. It was an honour for us in Sovereignty when you allied to the cause, and you came and you joined us, and you were willing to put your name forward as deputy leader. So it's been superb having you on board. We're delighted as well that you are going to be standing as the sovereignty candidate for Angus South. So anyone that is in Angus or Broughty Ferry, Arbroath surrounding area, is really important. Connect with Moira, offer her whatever support you can. But that's probably enough from me. So Moira, yeah, maybe you could fill in some blanks for us. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you ended up here.
Well, thank you for such a lovely introduction, David. And I'm honoured to be the Deputy Leader of Sovereignty. For those who don't know, I was arrested while lending books from a suitcase in January 2021, when the libraries had been closed for 10 months. And I was charged with culpable and reckless conduct, the maximum sentence of which is life imprisonment. And the whole experience was pretty horrific, being caged in the back of a police van, terribly claustrophobic in the little dog cage at the back, and taken in, fingerprinted, DNA taken, held in a cell, all those indignities. And it sort of has led me into this journey to understand the criminal justice system, because there's one thing to talk about it and there's one thing to experience it. And in June 2021, my case wasn't called on the morning. On the morning I was due in court for the trial, and it turned out that I found out 2 years later that the charges were not dropped a month later in June 2021, but my solicitor hadn't imparted the good news to me. So anyway, that's another story. But since then, I mean, I just keep coming across people. I met a man in Kirkcaldy High Street who explained he was held on remand in Perth prison, and he was told he wasn't allowed free association in the prison, within the prison, basically let out of his cell if he didn't take the what do you call them, the gene therapy injections, which were still within clinical trial. So, I mean, that is horrific coercion. He hadn't even been tried. He hadn't been convicted of anything. And so I've slowly learned that we're living in quite a barbaric system of injustice, which is what we're here to talk about tonight.
I think a lot of people imagine that there's very strict separation between the judiciary and the politicians and the political sphere. And they sort of have visions that, it's maybe a bit like the American system, they have a completely independent judiciary chosen by the judiciary, but basically they can do whatever they want. That's really not the case in a Scottish context. Can you talk to us a little bit about political interference in the Scottish judiciary?
Yes, I mean, I didn't understand any of this, until I've started doing a lot of research, and it's really quite shocking. Since the Parliament was created, the Holyrood Parliament was created in 1999, there's been no separation of powers. It was set up that the Lord Advocate of Scotland, who is head of prosecutions, they're also called His Majesty's Advocate, they also sit on the cabinet. There's also a Scottish minister. So actually every prosecution there has ever been since 1999 has not been free of political interference. And Roger Livermore, he's a really good campaigner. I think he was himself a Crown prosecutor, and he's quoted in this article. And that's Dorothy Bain, by the way. She runs Scotland, for anyone who doesn't know, and he explains it really well. He says COPFS, that's the Crown Office Prosecution Fiscal Service. I call it Persecution Fiscal Service, but he says it's the Scottish Government Prosecution Service. It is headed by two Scottish Government ministers, and that's Dorothy Bain and another one called Ruth Charteris, who's the Solicitor General. And he says they are always part of the government and can never be independent of that which they are always part of. You see? So here they are, and this is Ruth Charteris. This is explaining it. But this is, there's Dorothy Bain, this is Ruth Charteris. Don't be fooled by their pretty faces, because they're ruthless. And then we have, on the website of the Scottish Government, they have a picture of who's in the Scottish Cabinet. And this is where the deception is. They've missed out Dorothy Bain and Ruth Charteris. They're not mentioned. So the general public are not aware of this. You see? Now, this is what we want. Just back to what we want, not what we want, what we're going to get in a liberated Scotland. You know, we're going to get rid of all this rubbish, you know, where the First Minister goes to the Privy Council with the Lord Advocate and she gets her instructions. She comes back and arrests who she wants and what subset she wants. We're going to have just, you know, separate the judiciary from the Scottish Parliament and bring back regional policing.
Yeah, absolutely. It would make a huge difference. But unfortunately, we've seen massive centralisation of the police service in Scotland, which is a huge issue. Yes. I think the agenda seems very much often driven around sort of like pet crimes, and I think this is where you perhaps see the downside, or one of the downsides. Of course, you can think of others, but one of the downsides of that lack of separation between the judiciary and the political sphere is that, you know, it might be, for instance, hate crime is the thing of the moment, and so you start to see, for instance, target setting, and you start to see the politicians working to convince the public that there's a problem that really doesn't exist, or if it does exist, it's a social problem. It's not necessarily something legal. So how do you see Scottish ministers doing that, working to convince the public of the fact that there are all these problems that don't necessarily exist or don't exist to the same extent?
Well, the media helps with this, but I'd like to put on a little clip. First, Angela Constance speaking. She's the Justice Minister in the Scottish Parliament, followed by Dorothy Bain. And this is how they're telling us we've got a problem. And Dorothy Bain is just using emotion to drive it. She doesn't actually say anything. But anyway, I'll put it on, let you hear, just 27 seconds.
Whereas other aspects of the bill are very much focused on addressing the long-standing concerns around the low conviction rate for rapes and other sexual offences.
We need to resolve these issues in and around sexual crime. They have a profound impact on victims. They ruin lives. We've got to do something about it.
So she's a Scottish minister. She says we've got to do something about it. Then she goes about lobbying to make all the changes, to make it happen, to the procedure, to legislation, instructions to the police, whatever, and she makes it happen. So it's the whole thing is a politicized prosecution service.
And we did see the rape conviction rate go through the roof in a very, I think it went up from sort of the 40s to around about 80% or more in a very, very short space of time. Now, it seems to me that's entirely the wrong way to go about it. You need to have strict evidentiary standards for. Could you talk a little bit, going off script here, could you talk a little bit about, you know, the sort of penalties that those convicted of rape would face and the consequences, particularly the consequences if you think of someone, there should be severe penalties for rape, but only under circumstances where that conviction is safe and there are high evidentiary standards. But what currently is what sort of sentences are those convicted of rape being put away for?
Well, I would say it's generally upwards of 10 years, and based on purely verbal claims, which I'll explain to you in a minute how Dorothy Bain has sort of changed procedure to make that happen. But huge, horrific penalties. Men can even be given an order of lifelong restriction, which is jail until death. It's really, really horrific. And this is affecting, soon there won't be any family in Scotland, I think, who won't know, won't know someone who's accused, because it just takes someone walking in a police station making a false allegation and you're off to the prison. Then the Scottish Government recently, because the prisons are overflowing, to such a dangerous level, they then arbitrarily said, oh, well, if you're under 25, we're going to make it, you have a lesser sentence, which is ageist, complete nonsense. I mean, you cannot have people making up sentencing on the hoof. So somebody who's 24 sentenced the year before has 8 years and 10 years, and then the 24-year-old the following year gets a 4 or 5 year sentence. I mean, this is just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to.
Well, I
just want to explain how they're. Oh, sorry, David. I'll wait to.
Well, can you explain how they've changed the evidentiary standards to make it easier to gain convictions?
Yes, that's what I'd like to do. It's this report is by Jim's Justice for Innocent Men. That's families who've been absolutely not, as well as their loved ones in prison. Their families have been persecuted as well by vigilante groups online, and the police are allowing this. It's absolutely horrific. But they also, it was a questionnaire, and they also got responses from men in prison. Terrific response, and that was only one prison out of 16. I mean, I believe it's something like 70% of all cases now in the High Court are sexual offences. That's how much they're targeting men. Now, this question is, what was the prosecution case based on accuser's statement and hearsay only? And it's just one after another. Yes, no physical evidence. The case was based on the accuser's statements only. No actual evidence, just lies, hearsay, single photo of bruise. Yeah. No DNA was found, even though he offered to give DNA himself. Absolutely no evidence, not even a date, just a time frame of a few years. I mean, that's the thing that shocked me the most, that there was no dates. You just say, oh, between, it's often ex-partners who are the accusers, and it might say between May and September. You know what I mean? And there's testimony, of a man, he said he was in the army, and he thought, well, that I can prove it. I was out of the country when he was accused of this. So he was able to prove that, and the police allowed him, the accuser, to change her statement. So she changed her statement to another date, and he was out of the country that date as well. So he proved that, and they allowed him to change it a second time. So this is, I mean, it's just absolutely diabolical. And it's, now where is it? Yeah, amended statements. A complete manipulation from the police and prosecution towards the jury to confuse them. I've even heard sometimes the police will withdraw a charge because it's a really crazy, absolutely crazy, allegation. One involved an accuser who said it gave a graphic statement of giving birth to a baby, and she said it was his baby, he'd raped her, and she was underage. So you can imagine the sentence he got. But they took out one crime when they spoke to a relative and found out that part was not true. They withdrew that charge because they didn't want the jury to see that she was psychologically damaged, because it discredited all her testimony. So they're carefully crafting it to get convictions. Yeah.
Have you uncovered any evidence that the police are working with the accused to strengthen their cases before going to court?
Well, they've got a specialist police officer who's trained to ask 20 questions, I think, to ask questions. I started to notice patterns in things like accusing the men of, when she was asleep, something happening, or, accusing her, of accusing him of kidnap. And there was just different things I've seen. And apparently I'm waiting for that, but somebody has them, the questions that the police ask. So they kind of ask the questions to get the answers they want, very leading questions. But what they do, the Crown Office and Prosecution Service works with the police, and they've changed all the language. Like, instead of complainant, they replaced it with a victim. So the victim will be believed. The victims, of course, are guaranteed anonymity, and the men can be named before they're even tried. Now, I just want to say here, that there's obviously, people who are horrifically raped, but this isn't helping anybody. Jailing people with no evidence, because now we don't know who's the dangerous man and who's the lovely family man. They're all lumped together. I mean, this is so destructive for society. It's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I
think the way that a lot of people imagine the police working is that when it comes to crime and the investigation of crime, that they're basically mostly responding to shall we say, complaints or reports of crimes. But I think it seems to be more what you're suggesting is they've got particular crimes and they're going that are, shall we say, in focus, and they're going out and almost like seeking to try and uncover as many possible crimes of a particular category. But whether they're real or not, then there seems to be this sort of like target setting. It's almost like, Tony Blair's NHS in the 1990s, yeah, we're going to have targets on this, targets on that. Do you think that is what's going on?
Definitely, they're targeting the public. They're not protecting the public. Now, this is just a 4-second clip from BBC documentary, A Force in Crisis, Corruption in the Police in Scotland. And it's just I'll let you hear it.
Every shift had a target. Every officer had targets.
Do you hear that?
Every shift had a target. Every officer had targets.
Right. Now, I'd like to play another clip. This is an excellent documentary for anyone who wants to see it. It's on YouTube. It's called A Force in Crisis. And ironically, the Chief Constable of Police Scotland, the interviewer asked him in that about the sexual allegations against him when he was at Tullyallen. But he wasn't prosecuted. They just did a wee hearing. and you know, he said he fell asleep. What was it? He had too much to drink and he fell asleep in the wrong place. You know, so that was the end of his problems. So anyway, it's an excellent documentary. So this is 47 seconds.
The first version of the report is filled with quotes from officers. 334 in all were spoken to. Officers on the beat are almost bullied into producing returns to satisfy management. Questionable methods, such as the recategorization of crime to meet targets. Officers may feel under pressure to fake stop search returns to boost the figures. In some instances, officers felt pressure to charge a person even when there's not enough evidence in order to meet targets. If you do not reach the targets or you speak out against the impact of targets, you're either ignored or replaced.
There you go. Well, that's from the horse's mouth.
It's chilling, isn't it?
Chilling.
And, you know, it doesn't need to be that way. I was reading an article about the Isle of Colonsay, you know, which the population's not zero. It's, I think it's 100 and something nowadays, but apparently up until a crime was committed in 1993, they'd gone centuries, like, I can't remember, it was something crazy, like 5 or 6 centuries without there being a single recorded crime. So that's actually something that should be normal, you know, particularly in high trust societies. That sort of you know, lack of criminality should be normal. Well, as soon as you start giving police officers targets, they'll be out there looking for things to
Well, they'll lose their
prosecute.
job, or be, you know, they won't. If you want promotion, you've just got to charge anyone for whatever crime they're telling you need charges on. Now, this is I need to talk about a case. The Law Society of Scotland and Faculty of Advocates intervened in appeals in rape cases in Scotland. They took it to the Supreme Court in London. This was heard in October last year, and I think it's still waiting for a conclusion. But I've studied this case, and basically it says, under the legislative definition of case, they're not trying people on the actual legislative definition. For example, it says it's in the Sexual Offences Scotland Act 2009, rape. It says if a person with a penis, without another person be consenting, right? So that's if she said no, right, in court. But this B is without any reasonable belief that B consented, and this has not been allowed to be discussed in court. They're not allowing the men to provide evidence, and how they're doing it is they're using the Morov doctrine, which means just two verbal people going to the police with a similar story is corroboration, and articles. They've introduced these articles, and they keep tweaking any chance of a fair trial. And well, in the past, to explain, it used to be that women were really treated horrifically in court. Brought up, their sexual past was brought up, and that was really uncalled for. But they've moved it now to be absolutely extreme, that completely relevant evidence isn't allowed to be submitted if it might lower her standing, if it in any way insults her, or damages, would question her character. So we've got real scallywags, who are out there to get compensation, which we'll talk about in a minute. And they're painted as angels in court. The men are not, you can't submit anything to show, he left me with her, he was babysitting her children after she accused him of this, and, great sex, see you tomorrow night. And, none of that's allowed in court.
So why is it not allowed? That would seem to be exculpatory evidence.
It's Articles 274. The defence has to apply to the court to be allowed to submit the evidence, and it seems that the court always says no. This has just been, this is just, across all the families. That's what we're hearing. Absolutely, evidence that would prove their innocence, and they're not allowed to submit it. It's just extraordinary, and it's.
And it seems as though we spoke a little bit about the sentences that men facing these charges are being charged are facing themselves.
Yes.
How has it come about that we have this public pressure for longer prison sentences?
Right. Well, that's another thing. I mean, I've got. I read. This is a brilliant report from the Prison Reform Trust. And it's called The Very Long-Term Prison Population in Scotland. And it's absolutely fascinating. It says in the, what was it, 1970s? Oh, I can't see it. But anyway, it was in the 1970s. It was something like, for murder, the average sentence that was actually served was, it was something like 8 or 9 years. Because people might get a higher sentence, but might get out on parole at a certain point. So in the 1970s, they were serving that for murder, and now the average is 20 years. So people, the media are feeding the stories all the time that it's Scotland's soft on crime, but the reality is completely different. And then there's this propensity to hold people on remand before trial, and a quarter of the prison population, which is 95% men, because men are monsters and women are lovely. I've got it. I've been listening, I've been paying attention. Domestic violence, it's always, men against women. It's never the other way around. Ha ha. And but after the coronavirus tyranny, I think they've increased it from about 6 months to about 2 years. So people are having their lives destroyed, losing their homes, having their homes repossessed, losing their jobs, losing everything. Have been held for 2 years before they're tried. So I punish then try. So the prisons, quarter of the prisons are full of people who haven't been tried. Then we've got reasons that they've introduced reasons that men can't get out, and one of them, if uncovered, is for sexual offences anyway, they say that they can't leave, and the parole board makes a condition of release that they've got to do a programme for sexual offenders. So, but when they get to the time of their parole, they've served 50% of their sentence, whatever, and they haven't started the programme. The programme hasn't been available to them, so they have to stay in. Now, what we've uncovered as well is they've introduced, you've got to be assessed to go on the waiting list for the programme. So there's over 1,000 people, 1,000, I got a FOI on this one, and 2,022 people, men, are awaiting assessment for the generic programme assessment. 1,022. Now, they don't even get on that automatically. They've got to be referred to that. So you can I actually asked one, I didn't get a response to it, but I asked, what's the longest time from somebody, entering prison to getting on a programme? Anyway, I did, because there could be outliers. You shouldn't always ask about averages. I didn't get an answer to that. But anyway, there's 1,000 people waiting to be assessed to go on a sex offenders waiting list for a programme. Now, one man said to me, he said, if they're deciding whether it's appropriate he does the programme, he said, could you decide that outside when I'm at home? You know what I mean? What do you need to assess whether a sex offender's right to do a sex offenders programme? Do you know what I mean? But they're just coming up with strategies to keep the men in. It's It's diabolical. And then in 2006, they created this OLR, Order of Lifelong Restriction sentence. And better safe than sorry. And the Scottish Government finances to the tune of about 2 million a year on wages alone. The Risk Management Authority is basically the torture quango of the Scottish Government. And only that was it was introduced in 2006. It said only 2 people given an order of lifelong restriction had ever been released from prison. That article was written in 2018, but we're talking about people who were given sentences of 2 years, 18 months, 3 years, whatever. They're still in 16 years later. I mean, it's absolutely barbaric. When I heard this, I felt ashamed to be Scottish.
And,
so
and have they attempted to appeal the OLRs? And
yes, one man's a lawyer himself. He's tried everything, and the appeals court isn't interested. They're just the psychologists, and to create this OLR report, this risk management report, they actually add, this is part in the legislation, there's to list all the allegations that have ever been against them in their life. So they're not just being assessed on what's been discussed in court. They bring out everything, which could be lots of false allegations. I mean, it's just, you couldn't make it up. It's so cruel and unjust and breaching all their human rights. But I'd just like to explain, I mean, I don't know if you can see that there, but no matter what sentence you get, whether it's 15 years or 2 months or 6 months or 14 years, 20 years, 4 years, 2 years, if you get an OLR, you're jailed until death.
Has Scotland received any international criticism for these OLRs? Are you aware of any?
We don't need the United Nations torture czar to tell us, but he's saying, I mean, a sentence should be proportionate to what they've done, not independent, not indefinite and arbitrary, which is what it is. The odd. Usually, if they leave prison, if they've taken their own life, or they're taken to a mental hospital because they've cracked, because they can't get out. They cannot get out. They're hostages. After their full sentence is served, they're hostages. That's the word I use for them. So I'm involved in a No to OLR campaign with a woman who runs it. She's wonderful. And her brother's he's been held hostage. He was one of the first to get it. In 2006, he got a 14-month sentence, and he's still in prison 18 years later, and with no chance of getting out. And the odd one who has got out recently, maybe after a bit of pressure, they're back in straight away because they became homeless or something, or someone faced, it just spurious things. But it's a torture agency, so the OLR sentence needs to be scrapped along with the risk management agency along with it. And you cannot listen to this. We're funding this organisation. You can't even respond to them on Twitter. They block. They say, "Oh, you can only reply if they follow you or something." I mean, it's completely unaccountable. It's in Paisley. I mean, these people they're so ignorant. I mean, these psychologists, and they say our mission, and they talk about fairness. Fairness. I mean, what a joke. Fairness.
As the government is working at the moment to try and increase the number of convictions for sexual offences, my understanding is that part of that is that they're essentially, incentivizing is maybe not strong enough an expression. They're bribing, inducing people to create or report sexual offences and reports of sexual offences. So how are they doing that? How is that happening?
They are, but they're incentivizing these psychologists to to write this horrific report, because they get paid, about 10,000 to present this to the court. Then they get paid the same again to give it to the defence. They get paid every year for writing the reports, and to just keep someone in. It's the scam of the century. Now, this risk management agency, the budget they're going to get is 2 million for wages. 2 million for wages. in 2025 to 26 for torturing people. Scary. So anyway, back to but the women, they're or it could be men, I know, but we'll just keep it simple if you don't mind. The criminal injuries compensation. Now that's this is the women's rights of women. It's called document, but it says within this victims of sexual assault. If you have been the victim of a sexual offence, including rape, then you do not need to show evidence of a diagnosed mental or physical injury to get compensation. This is the good bit, because the fact you have experienced the crime is seen as injury in itself. So it's just taken on trust. And we're hearing there's some women, it's become a complete racket. I mean, when, I'm hearing they've had, it's the 7th man they've had in court. And again, the solicitor isn't allowed to show that as defence, that everyone she goes out with, she's accusing. But it doesn't always mean, you don't need to touch someone. I mean, it could be a historic allegation. You say, I've never met her, I don't know her. And that's not, you'll still be convicted. So it's, if she says that she said no, she was raped and she said no, that's it, off to the pokey. For 10 years or more, or if you've had a lot of false allegations in your life, then you'll be jailed until death. But the FOI, I got an FOI, very interesting. That obviously criminal gangs are catching on to this easy money, and this is how much it's gone up. The cases in 2015, the number of cases reported to claims made to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority was 437. In 2024, 10 years later, is 1,274. This is just for Scotland, by the way. This is my question was, what were the claims after people reported rape to Police Scotland? That was the question. And then what we have paid out the taxpayer in 2015 was 3 million. In 2024, it's nearly 10 million. Nearly 10 million. So the incentives are working.
And what other benefits, not that we're trying to incentivize this, but what sort of benefits are the victims, to use the terminology that they employ, what benefit are they able to get following a claim?
Well, there's fast-tracked housing, and for people in sort of nasty disputes with their ex-husband or partner, the father of their children, is often used as you make a accusation like that, and the children are immediately cut off from their father. So it succeeds in breaking ties with the father, getting rid of him when a new man comes on the scene. So it's fast-tracked housing. Also, that there was a horrific, well, it's been going for years now. Do you remember the government introduced that you wouldn't get child benefit for any more than 2 children? Mm-hmm. You'll know about that. Yeah. Yep. So they've got they gave the provider a form that you can fill out to say that you didn't have, it was the child was a product of non-consensual sex. So you'd fill that in and to get money for a 3rd or subsequent child. So there's another incentive for someone to make a false allegation. You could even have a man, a couple absolutely desperate that he's the fall guy and he wants his child to be fed. He could even, it's crazy, but he could even consent to it because they've got no other option to feed their child. To do that to anyone is absolutely horrific, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess, but most people just still are laboring under the illusion that oh, there'll be the appeal courts there. It can't be this bad. Surely it can't be this bad. But there's no conspiracy with any of this. All of this is, you've brought your receipts. All of this is in the public domain, and anyone can go away and check out what we're saying here. And what a shame for Scotland to have let our standards of criminal justice fall to this level.
It's
But
terrible. And
yeah, go for it.
no, I'm just going to talk about the appeal court. It
Yeah.
seemed to change in the 1990s when the government set up a sort of, can't remember what it's called, SSCRC. They've all got so many acronyms, but it's supposed to be able to overturn miscarriages of justice quickly. But what it's done is just prevented justice. No, they're gatekeepers, and it's actually impossible, I think, to have a conviction overturned. I'm waiting for an FOI on this and asking how many convictions have been overturned. The appeal court is, although you don't need any evidence in the relation to sexual offences to have a conviction, the convicted need to provide additional new evidence to an appeal court. But the appeal court often is used to punish harder. It up sentences. Even the prosecution have said, "Oh, the sentence is too light." They're using the appeal court as another weapon. A man, it was nothing to do with sexual offences, but he appealed a 4-year sentence, and they gave him an order of lifelong restriction, which means he's jailed until death. He appealed a 4-year sentence. He's now got jail until death. And that's where appealing got him. So the appeal court is just a kid on. If you're convicted, I'd say I think there's no chance of overturning it for anybody. And the CEO of the Mojo Miscarriages of Justice organisation explains this. It's absolutely horrific. There's one thing also I'd like to say is, you would think when the police are charging everyone on the say-so of an accuser, that everyone who's committed rape would be then, going to jail, whether they're guilty or not. But sadly, another thing I've uncovered, a very credible woman called Michelle on Twitter. Her handle was it Michelle? Oh, Michelle, once more. And she said she was brutally raped in a hospital, and has internal injuries to prove it. And the police couldn't have been less interested. And she's had FOIs done across the whole of England. Now, this is for the Met Police over a 2.5-year period from 2019 to 22. In the hospitals, London hospitals, there was 501 reported rapes. How many charges do you think? How many men do you think were charged? That's zero.
Good grief.
0 convictions. And the other one, that's Yorkshire Police. Is it West Yorkshire Police? 51 reported, 0 charged. And she said they were all coming back 0, 0, 0, 0. So there's another terribly disturbing thing. It depends on the locus of where you were raped, whether the police are going to investigate. So this is is the folk at the top telling the folk at the bottom what to ignore, what to it's just diabolical. And we got I was just to shoot on this topic again. This is when I was in Govan Police Station. Now this shows the police. This isn't from the horse's mouth. The policeman saying that they got orders from above not to take complaints. So but more than that. More than that.
Listen to me. Assistant Chief Constable Alan Spears has issued instructions to the Police Service of Scotland that we are not to take any requests of this matter. We are not to deal with it. Okay. That is the official police.
Who's made that?
Assistant Chief Constable Alan Spears.
Right. Well, when you need to speak to Assistant Chief Constable
Alan Spears.
I've had my instructions from him.
Wait a minute.
Anyway, he's yeah. So he so he's saying the whole of Police Scotland got their orders from Alan Spears. So it's not, the police force isn't operating in regions. People, in a police station, depending on what comes in, you prioritise. It's not working like that at all. The police won't take. This is why Scotland's becoming more dangerous, because serious crimes are not being investigated and the public are being targeted. It's not what you want in a police force at all. Now, I also went on the same day. I mean, I tried to, hand over evidence. It was witness statements from the Scottish COVID inquiry, which included criminality. And again, the man wouldn't take it.
Printed out a lot. All the statements are harrowing that in the COVID-19, Scottish COVID-19 inquiry. We've picked out ones that actually show really obvious criminality. They're not dealing with criminality, the COVID inquiry. It's learning lessons. We're getting away with murder. That's what they're learning. But the important, this one, Pamela, her brother was killed in hospital in 9 Wells, and I've marked the part here. There's a signature that wasn't his on a medical form. It's really serious stuff.
So that's a criminal to do that.
I'm trying to show you what's criminal.
Yes,
the police need to investigate it.
Gillian Grant, I do not resuscitate born for her grandmother. It wasn't her signature on the form. So I've marked the relevant bits. And this chap, if you go to the Substack, you can see there's more than these, but these are the most obvious criminality. And a common theme is they're killed with midazolam, morphine, and nil by mouth. So it's murder. It's murder.
Has any of these people came directly?
Yeah, she's Pamela Thomas has been refused from the police. They're not doing their job in Perth. She's gone to the police several times, and she's in a terrible state for what they've done to her brother.
So they're not taking complaints about murder in hospitals, but they're chasing after a man who's accused of pinching someone's bum. And I kid you not, it's as bad as that. Who are getting on the sexual offences register.
So massive amount to do and we're only just scratching the surface here of some of the problems in the Scottish criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
Next year swings around. Hopefully you're elected as the constituency MP for Angus South, and we'd certainly encourage anyone listening to get out and support Moira and join the campaign. Imagine yourself as Justice Secretary. Where would you be starting in terms of getting all of this sorted out? What would you like to see change first in Scotland?
Well, the separation of powers, obviously, from the government and the judiciary and the police. A reinstatement of regional forces, allowing them to decide their own, prioritising what comes in, having absolutely no targets. And another really important one is I've realised recently, which is quite unbelievable, but on a jury of 15, you can actually be convicted 8-7 in Scotland.
And if you compare that to what's going on in other countries, that's a nonsense. There are other countries where it's like 80% or unanimous. There are plenty of countries that will expect unanimity from the jury before doing something as serious as sending someone away for decades.
10 years. Now, if it's 7, so 8 have said you're guilty, 7 have said not guilty, and you're off to prison for 10 years. But if one person in the jury said something, a different decision, and it was 7-8, you'd walk home. I mean, and I heard recently in America, they've made every state, it has to be a unanimous decision by the jury. Now, recently, a man has come out of prison in England, Andrew Malkinson, he was held for 17 years. And that's another thing. He would have got out 10 years earlier if he'd admitted, if he said he'd done it.
Mhm.
So innocent men are spending far longer in prison. It's diabolical. And anyway, I just read a wonderful article actually about him. He said he would be far too frightened to have a relationship with any woman after what's happened to him, because they can say at some point, at any point in the future, that they didn't consent between September and May, or between 2021 and 24. I mean, and he said, interestingly, he was convicted. It's 13-2 in England to get a conviction. And he said most unsafe convictions it's not unanimous. So he thinks changing it to be unanimous would get rid of a lot of unsafe convictions, because all the ones I think I'm talking about, they're not unanimous at all.
Mhm.
They're not unanimous. So that would be a big thing.
Yeah. Well, to anyone listening to the show, if you are based in Scotland, we can't make progress with this without your help. So first of all, please join Sovereignty if you haven't done so already. We'll include the link to join Sovereignty in the description below the video. Secondly, please connect with us if you're able to help with our campaigns going into next year's election. Or our campaigning activity more generally. We would love to hear from you. We're always looking for candidates, for election agents, for folk to do canvassing. We can make a difference in this. This level of injustice is bringing shame to our nation, and it has to change, and it has to change fast. But it will only change once decent, ordinary Scots start speaking up. And also, for anyone that is listening to this broadcast overseas, then please spread awareness of the injustices in the Scottish criminal justice system, as it's ironically named. I think sometimes we tend to think in the West everything is all right. But we're bringing your attention to a reality that's very, very different. And the reality for men who have been unfairly convicted and who are in jail is devastating. It is lifelong consequences for these men and for their families,
children,
and for women as well. This is not just about men's rights, but these are mothers, sisters, aunts, and so on that are affected as well. These are children that are often denied access to their fathers. So this is a huge topic, and we would love.
David,
Yeah, sorry, on you go, Moira.
No, it was just about children at school. They're bullying and they're having to stay off school. I mean, especially these vigilante groups should be obviously not allowed. The police I think they're backing it because they're getting more business. They're getting their targets met by divulging where the men live and creating this hate towards them.
Yeah.
But there's children involved, and it's really shocking. And men shouldn't be named. I don't think anyone should be named until they're convicted. I don't think they should be named. That's another thing. Mm-hmm.
Well, Moira, thank you very much for joining us on the Sovereignty podcast, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again sometime. Would you want to say one last thing before?
I was going to say one last thing. Maybe, I hope we've enlightened some people to these serious issues, and maybe next time we could talk about covert policing, undercover policing in Scotland. That might be another interesting topic, which I'm quite knowledgeable about.
Sounds good. If we don't get banned before then, let's go for it.
Okay. Thanks, David.
Thank you ever so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.